Now we have the Gauteng Premier here, David Makhura, the presenter over at CNBC, looking at a very happy man. Why is that?
Yes, I can't be happier than this. We would have thought that we would have done very well if we get to $5 billion to add onto the president's investment drive. 2 weeks ago, he raised $20 billion. So our target was $5 billion. So $6.8 billion makes me sleep happily.
Obviously, Premier, you've added to the kitty of that $100 billion. But we've learned something as a result of this inaugural gathering, if you will. There was a message for policymakers like yourself.
Yes.
That through policy we can facilitate faster investments.
Yes.
What are some of the key takeaways that you will be presenting to the President and other lawmakers within the cabinet about things that we could change to better facilitate investments?
I think South Africa is already doing a lot. This whole idea of setting up one-stop shops, we already have a one-stop shop here in Gauteng, right here in Sandton, at the Gauteng Investment Center. We have one in Cape Town. We have another one in eThekwini. Rolling out that to make it easier for investors to come into the country to invest. There's other important issues which the President has already been addressing about policy uncertainty, and the heads of states who were here, all of them are speaking with one voice, that we will need to ensure that the issues that government can resolve, regulation, sometimes there's just too much inhibitions. We should put in place what's called smart regulation. We do need to ensure regulation, but it must be smart regulation. It shouldn't just be for its own sake. I think the last thing is what the President of the African Development Bank emphasized, is that we should run our countries, and in our case, I want to say, our provinces and states, subnational states and cities, we should run them as CEOs. I see myself as the CEO of Gauteng.
Rightfully so.
And what that means is that we've got to measure the work we do. How is it impacting on lives of people? Are we able to produce real results? And we came to this conference with one message. At the end of the conference, we want concrete results, and we do have concrete results. So if we operate like that, I think we can see Africa's transformation moving much faster than it has ever been in the last 50 years.
And of the $6.8 billion, one project that interested me, and I ran into one of my old friends, Ronnie and Dooley, and he was very excited about this railway project, which the details are emerging. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, there's the Gautrain expansion in Gauteng province. We started a process of adding more coaches, but we want to actually expand the Gautrain footprints, not just to where the rail system is now. We want the Gautrain to go all over the province. It must be the backbone of our public transport system. It must evolve from an elite train into a mass transit system. It must go to the West Rand. It must go to Soweto. It must go to Mamelodi. It must go to the south of Johannesburg, to everywhere where we currently don't have a rail network. We want the Gautrain to be expanded and integrated into that. And the Gautrain is one of those projects that attracted huge interest. I was saying earlier on, there was a stampede, investor stampede. Every investor, because you know what we did? We did a great thing. We put most of them from the airport onto the Gautrain. We brought them here, and they saw that this is moving.
Well, it's a project that's the envy of Africa. I mean, how long is it going to take before it reaches right across the city, as you're saying?
I think now that we've got, out of the 7 projects we put at the South African, in the South African project book for this forum, 6 of them are at financial close. So it's only one project that really didn't make it. And that includes the Gautrain. I think with the kind of investment sentiment that comes out of here and the number of people, the Gautrain is oversubscribed. And I think the final financial close, that's what we're waiting for. we will move the Gauteng expansion in a time much quicker than we have thought before. We had thought this would be a project over 20 years, but we've got a commitment, funding commitment on it. So I'm very, very happy.
Premier, ultimately, you have political imperatives that would need to show as well. People from the outside cannot hear the broader conversations about the billions of dollars invested if it doesn't actually impact on their lives. So the fruition, the construction, the real momentum behind these projects must be felt by ordinary people on the ground, and also the job aspect.
Yes, certainly. I mean, we have computed this. It's very clear that every rand you put into infrastructure translates into incomes for people, incomes for households, and jobs as well. So there is no better story to tell how to improve the well-being of people than to invest in infrastructure. You don't only, the impact of it is not only when the infrastructure is operating, but as you lay it out, as you do the construction, certainly more jobs. The Gauteng project alone created 92,000 jobs into the Gauteng economy. That phase one. So as we roll it out now, it will add more jobs, but it also increases government revenue in terms of how much comes into government coffers and what goes as well into citizens, and the number of new businesses that creates an opportunities for our own local contractors here. The training of engineers, young people who are brought, the skills development program. So these infrastructure investment projects are hugely impactful. They don't just deal with one dimension of it, they impact on all these various areas. So I think that's really, and I want to say that we're also taking care of township businesses. So as we have these programs, we're also saying what are the opportunities for the township entrepreneur, the township enterprise that's there, that's doing some small things. We want to bring them into this value chains of the infrastructure projects.
$6.8 billion. What would you estimate the jobs impact's going to be? Is it tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands?
Well, I haven't done the computation yet. But, you know, looking at each of those projects, one of the projects is the school build program, which is going to be a private-public partnership. It depends, of course, on the nature of the project. Some projects are a bit more capital intensive, others are more labor intensive. So depending on the nature of the projects, for example, the Gauteng project will be hugely impactful in terms of jobs. I was giving you the numbers. Phase one of the Gauteng created 92,000 jobs. So we're looking at phase two creating, phase two is much bigger than phase one. So we would like to double the number of jobs there. The school build program is also much more labor intensive. We also have a waste to energy program, which is a little bit more capital intensive. So it will vary. The impact of all those projects will vary. But I have no doubt that the 6.8 billion rands that's coming out of this first of its kind investment forum in our continent is also going to impact on our own economy here. What makes me particularly happy as well is that we have a South African consortium that's also investing 2.6 billion rands into a rail, a sky train, a light rail system in Accra in Ghana. So you have a two-way system here. So money is flowing into our own economy here, but it's also flowing into other economies. Our own business people are also willing to invest in other parts of our continent. There can be no better story for our continent than to see Africans investing in their own countries. We need this to unlock the full potential of our continent to address this infrastructure gap.
And Premier, while you're there, this conference, if nothing else, showed that Africa really can deliver as one for each other to address its own infrastructure developmental needs. But there has been a large emphasis put on de-risking African projects. And political instability was something that we used to talk about a lot during the last administration, that we are still working on as part of this administration. And it differs throughout Africa. What are you advising policymakers such as yourselves about addressing political instability and creating policy certainty for investments to ultimately land safely on investment runway?
Well, I know that question is very firmly on the agenda of President Cyril Ramaphosa. He spoke about it yesterday when he addressed the conference here. He spoke about it 2 weeks ago when he addressed the first investment conference in our country. So in our case as a country, we are on the right track. If there's any doubt in Thomas out there that South Africa is really on the right track and that we have found our way back as a country, the investor mood out there is very, very different. And you could pick it up here as well, that the mood has changed. And I don't want, for us in South Africa, I think we are focusing on the right issues. Policy certainty, we are focusing on improving regulation, improving the ease of doing business. All those issues that the president addressed on the second day here and at the first South African Investment Conference, is what we, at our level, I am just a premier of a province. I'm not running a national ministry. We can do a lot even at our level, at a provincial level, at city level, again, to improve the ease of doing business, to ensure that we address infrastructure issues. We're working with business here in Gauteng on issues of specific skills in that various sectors are looking for. That's why we are setting up, in addition to the modernization of our education system, we are setting up schools of specialization to train young people in our province for the skills that our economy requires. So we can deal with also other additional issues to ensure there is reliability of energy supply to business, to improve the roads, the road infrastructure and water supply where the businesses are located. But we also can introduce some of the local incentives in Gauteng province as part of our land release. We say to business in these forums, if you want to locate in the township, we will make land available on a 100-year, 99-year lease basis, 100-year lease. We say to you, come and locate, build your factory in the township to employ 400 young people, to employ 1,000 women, to employ. We're making the land available as part of rapid land release because we want these jobs to be created in the spaces where our people live. This is part of what the policymakers can do. We have many levers. We have many levers, and we just need to use them. We just need to operate. No long meetings, no long talk. As I say, we are CEOs. We need to get things to happen as well.
Just one last question. I mean, the ink's on the contract now. The deals are being done. How are you going to track these projects in the coming years? Because that's one big question.
It's a very important question. We have these 6 projects that are all at financial close. So one of the important things in my office, those that are Gauteng-specific projects, I have a project team there that's going to just make sure that there is a proper follow-up with all, firstly with the African Development Bank. The African Development Bank is playing a very critical role. They are actually already de-risking a lot of these projects in African countries where there's huge political risk. There may be conflict there. They are playing a very important role. But you know, South Africa is not in that space. There's no political risk here in South Africa. So we are setting up a capacity in the Premier's office here in Gauteng to follow up, to just make sure that all those projects that were concluded here are taken to financial close. In Gauteng, we also have what we call the Gauteng Infrastructure Funding Agency. These are the guys who do project preparation. They did a great job, I must say to them. I take my hat off. The reason we could get 6 out of 7 projects we put here was because there was very good work around project preparation. Bankability, to get projects to bankability, and also go through government systems, go to National Treasury, go through the necessary approvals, apply about the viability. Would we have the money to pay back if we go for off-budget funding, alternative funding? All those things are important. So here in Gauteng, again, we do have a capacity for project preparation. That's why I think next year we will put a lot more projects on the table. South Africa's fiscal environment is very, very tight. Minister Tito Mboweni has to find money for many, many priorities. But infrastructure projects, the good thing with them is that they can attract private sector funding. So we need to get them queuing in the pipeline there so that we relieve the pressure of our fiscus. The fiscus must be used for other important priorities.
Premier, if I could, if you indulge me, Chris, last question to the Premier. When you opened, during the opening debate where you were on the panel, you said something that's really remained with me. You spoke about the entrepreneurial spirit of African women. And I thought about it in the context of this first inaugural Africa Investment Forum. Do you feel that enough capital is being deployed to embrace that very same spirit you talked about? Are we committing enough capital to women-funded projects?
Well, let me just say that I think one distinct thing about Africa is that firstly, you've got these women, African women go everywhere in the continent, are always selling something to put bread on the table, to educate their children, to ensure that their children have clothing. So the more dynamic group of women you can ever find anywhere in the world is African women, is in this continent. So they need support. And one of the key issues which was put on the table here, we didn't have enough African entrepreneurs and investors who are here. And that's the big challenge for the next conference. The next year's conference, the critical thing would be to bring this, ensure that you have a more diverse group, and the African women are particularly more represented. The second thing is about African youth. I also worry. I looked at the profile, the age profile of the people who were here. There weren't as many young people, including entrepreneurs. There weren't as many young people as Africa is beaming with energy of the youth. It's a youthful continent. These young people in the continent, they come from difficult terrains. They come from rural areas where there's nothing. But they are always searching for opportunities. They too need support. So again, the African Development Bank is an institution, is our prime institution in the continent. The president of the bank is very concerned about both the issue of women and the issue of the youth. Young people, all they have is their energy and their ideas. So to get these ideas, translate them into real businesses, you're going to need some fund that's very flexible. That's because you can't expect to get from the youth that which you would want to get from experienced business people. So there will also be a need to dedicate a fund to women entrepreneurs, but also to the youth, because the youth and the women are I said in the opening session yesterday, the wealth of Africa's greatest wealth is not its minerals, because minerals are exhaustible. And some of these minerals, exploiting them destroys the environment. Africa's greatest wealth is its youth and its women. They bring something else. And if we invest in the youth and the women, this continent can only thrive, can only move from one level to the next.
Chris Bishop.
Thank you very much, David Makhura, a very ebullient David Makhura on this day, the Gauteng Premier.